This week on the Markcast, USFL contract breakdowns. Is that what I'm hearing? Contract breakdowns for the USFL. We'll have all the information. Who do we got talking about that?
I mean, we wanted him this week and we got him. He's radioing in from the Boons. We have Mike Mitchell phoning into the show. So important that we get the updated USFL player contract information and breakdowns for you. League reaction to your article. Last question for me.
Yeah, so I have a lot of conversations with people that are close to these leagues and that are inside these leagues, and I was expecting some blowback, and surprisingly favorable.
Good. Okay.
Good. Because quite frankly, everything I wrote was factual.
So when you say phoning in, you're not saying it in a bad way. You're just saying like you use the phone to call in. Sometimes people say you're phoning it in, but this time it's a good thing because Mike Mitchell, always on top of these things. We love having him on the show. Also on the show, Reed's new starting quarterback for his BC Lions, not America's, but his BC Lions, Nathan Rourke.
Now, not to add more pressure to this, but the BC Lions are America's CFL team, right? This is known, right? So knowing that you have the hopes and dreams of America, right, and their team in the CFL as well, does that add any extra pressure at all to your plate heading into this season?
I mean, I just don't want to disappoint you guys, right? So I think absolutely tremendous weight has now been put on my shoulders.
Nathan is just a peach. Nathan is very happy to be carrying the weight, the hopes and dreams of America on his shoulders. Nathan's doing the Lord's work. And then we're breaking down all the CFL free agency, which is just as important as the USFL free agency, with friend of the show, longtime friend Rob Vanstone.
It's almost like you're picking a different fantasy football team every year.
It is.
And maybe it's kind of a partial keeper league where you can keep 4 or 5 players and then everything else goes into the pot. It's tough to build a team. Now, you can rebuild a team in no time if you spend your money wisely, but I don't like it.
That's all happening this week on the Markcast. Friday morning. Good Friday morning to you. The Markcast. Welcome to the show. Hey, what's up, man?
Happy Friday, Paul.
Happy Friday. Today's episode, CFL free agency is better than USFL free agency. Is that what I'm saying here?
I would say CFL free agency is greater than or equal to at least USFL free agency. We've had a lot of discussions online about, Google Sheets with USFL players who might be eligible. We've had a whole week of CFL free agency, I think, is at least as good or greater than. I think it needs more respect.
I agree. And let's be honest, better players are going to the CFL than they are the USFL. And, in the CFL, you don't have to pay for your own hotel rooms. So there's that. We'll talk about that here in a second, right? Will we? All right. On the show today, Mike Mitchell is going to be talking about those player contracts that we just mentioned right there. Nathan Rourke, the starting quarterback for Reed's BC Lions, going to be joining the show. And Rob Vanstone, friend of the show, frequent guest from the Regina Leader Post. We talk about CFL free agencies. So very cool show today. I was going to say something else. Show.
Not explicit. Mike is great. Mike is on location somewhere out in the boondocks. Mike called in. Mike is the only time I've ever allowed anyone to do a phone or interview.
Not true. You let Sheena do one once.
Well, and I let Brian Woods do one. So let's be fair all around. But Mike Mitchell is in the lead company. Great interview with Mike. 40 minutes of USFL tidbits coming up.
Cool stuff. So, and we also, like and subscribe to the podcast. We like those, we got to get those subscribes up so we can get that giveaway going. I don't know what we're doing at 2,000, right? That's
2,000. Yeah. So we have our Grey Cup merch. And then I just got today a original old new stock AAF San Antonio's Commander jersey, number 1. So I tell you, I posted that today. We got about 4 new subscribers right away. So I think people are so. But when we hit 2,000, we'll go through all that BS. We have all the Grey Cup stuff, and then we have the AAF Commanders jersey giveaway.
Cool stuff. So with that being said, we're gonna start off with USFL news, even though the title of the episode is CFL.
Yes, I'm the total hypocrite. Yeah, we have a lot of USFL stuff, and then we'll get to Rob and everything CFL after.
Awesome stuff. Starting off with this, the USFL draft will not be streamed or broadcast. That's per Reed and the sources from the USFL. You're working the sources. I'm so I'm impressed. Of course, the XFL had a Zoom and a stream, like they had a stream draft. The FCF had a draft that was played on the Twitch
FCF
there.
shows every draft they ever do.
I'm telling you, this is one moment where the FCF actually has something to brag on the USFL. You would think that they would do it. You think they'd call you and maybe like, can you do something for this? And I know you'd be willing to do it. It's
weird. It's one of those things that, 10% extra work, right? You're not going to make any money on streaming the USFL draft, but you're engaging the hardcores, and that's the people I think the USFL needs to work on.
So if you engage the hardcores, basically, you just set up a phone and just go live. Like,
yes,
you could easily do that.
They're all going to be on Zoom. Just turn on the Zoom link. Yeah.
Who would have thought?
But anyway, I confirm that story. You're welcome.
This is a massive mistake, and you're completely right when you ask that question. This is a mistake. It's great stuff for your YouTube channels. It's great stuff for your social medias. I don't know what Brian is thinking, but
the big thing right now is they're having the USFL head coaches draw their logos from memory on
content. That's their content.
That's their Twitter content right now.
That's a sarcastic round of applause. It's not real.
Killing it.
It's not real.
Kevin Sumlin just drew it like a G with a star. He couldn't do it
because he's drunk. Mike Mitchell obtained those player contracts in a headbook, and he has more details of that coming up, I assume, in your interview with Mike.
Yeah, we have more of that, but then we're going to go through some of this now. We're going to go through the nuts and bolts, and obviously Mike has the big, we kind of flush it out. The league has no comments on any of this, but I wanted to get your thoughts and feedback because I think you're going to have comments on a lot of these little tidbits that Mike pulled up.
Okay, so here's the little notes that I've got here right here. It's like $42,000 for the regular, $45,000 for the regular season. That's 10 games. If you're on the regular season non-active roster, it's $1,500 per week. Regular season roster, if you're playing, $4,500 per week. If you're active on game day, you get $800, or is it $850? $850 per win for players on the active or practice squad on game day, and your championship game bonus is $10,000 to each player. Your maximum possible salary is $75,750, but again, you have to pay for your own room and board.
Yeah, so we had that base salary last time. The win bonuses are new, right? The $850. That's kind of the new stuff. That max possible salary, because we didn't know the win bonuses that came out with part of Mike's reporting, and then also News USFL on Twitter had that. The other interesting things is the contract length of the players. The only 3 times. So what they're kind of doing is it's kind of this 2-year. It's a de facto 2-year contract. So once you're drafted, if you're not selected in the draft, obviously your contract's done. If you're cut, your contract is done. But then otherwise, your contract goes to December 31st of 2022. When you sign a USFL contract, you must option in to a second year. Okay. So the USFL will let you know in April if they are continuing your contract or not. That does not guarantee employment into the next year, because again, they can cut you on December 31st, and they would just have to pay you that health care from the end of the season through December, and then they could cut you.
So what you're saying is basically the contract benefits the USFL and not the player.
Yeah, and I get it, right? Everyone goes, well, the USFL should do that. They should get players. Absolutely, in terms of business I just want people. A lot was made when the AAF came out and they were trying to sign players to 3-year contracts. This is a 2-year contract, just not being called that way.
So here's my question. What kind of status do these players have? Are they independent contractors like WWE, or are they actually employees of the USFL?
So it talks a lot about, I would assume that they're employees, they're under healthcare here, right? So the one benefit of them playing in the bubble in Birmingham is they only have to go through Birmingham healthcare, right? Health workers, comp and all that stuff. So there's some benefits to that. I would imagine you're an employee of the USFL.
I mean, if you get workers' comp insurance, you don't necessarily need to be an employee though.
Well, we should have, I could ask Mike Mitchell this. We could I always forget that delineation that the WWE does. Yes. Are you an independent contractor? Are you an employee? I should ask the league that.
I mean, even the independent contractors in WWE are covered. If they get injured in the ring, the workers' comp covers them because it's workers' comp. Technically, they have to cover them legally. And this brings me to my point is that the non-compete clause, it says once a player is signed and plays the USFL, they are locked in for the full season through the USFL championship game. After the season ends in the summer, they can sign a with a team in the NFL only provided they notify the USFL and provide a copy of the contract. This is why I bring up the independent contractor status, is because if they are independent contractors, this might be a legal issue for, let's say some player in the USFL wants to go play in the XFL. That's kind of what I'm hinting at here.
Yeah.
And with that being said, like, that could test the legal limits of that contract.
Well, we'll have to do some more digging into this. The idea is that the coaches are also going to be under similar clauses and all of this. But yeah, it's like no CFL, no XFL, no fan control football, no anything like that. Only the NFL. And the weird thing with that is, like, they would have to release you from your contract, and then you would go sign, or you go try out. But then, like, what if you get cut from the NFL team? Like, maybe they don't need to. Then the USFL wouldn't need to bring you back. They could just be like, well, we cut you.
I mean, that might be a way to get out of your USFL contract, is if you get an NFL contract to get you out of it. Like, that might be the loophole. Like, hey, look, don't sign me to a regular contract. Just sign me to a practice squad contract. That would fall into the qualification. Yeah. I would assume. Sign me to a practice squad contract. So that would break my contract with the USFL. Then I can go play in the XFL or the CFL.
Yeah, the sticking point to me is, like I said, this continuing the healthcare thing through December, and then let's say you were cut and not brought back, you would never get into an XFL camp at that point.
No. The American Alliance Football AAF had a similar preemptive thing to lock people into like a 3-year deal, but we saw how far that went. Again, I was hitting on this earlier, that the players will need to find their own means of housing throughout the season. They have a housing and hotels designated by the USFL. They'll be made available at the rate of $150 per night. And this is when I heard about this started off that thing, that whole seeing things from past experiences in terms of the Spring League, even though it is a different entity, being sued by the group. Were they Indianapolis last year? Indianapolis. They didn't pay for hotel rooms, so now USFL is putting the onus of housing on the players, because maybe that was a lesson learned.
Yeah, it's taken care of through mini camp, training camp. Yeah, when we recorded last week, remember, we assumed that they were being taken care of, all of this, the whole season, because they were in the bubble. And then this came out after we recorded last week that Mike uncovered this. So Mike says that many of the players and agencies are, because they can change this, right? The USFL could opt to change this. It'd be about $3.24 million just for the rooms, not alone, including the incidentals, if you count 150 times 360 players times 60 nights times 150, whatever. So it's a substantial amount of money. But, the question is, they're being paid $45,000 minus room and board. Do you just say, hey, you're actually getting paid $35,000 and we're just going to include everything? But that doesn't sound as good.
No. And they still tax you on, if you get that room and they pay it and they take it out of your paycheck, you're still getting taxed, because that's technically taxable income.
Yeah, you're taxed on 45, not 35.
But I mean, so I'm saying, if in the mini camp, right, in the preseason camp, if they're covering your room and board, that's taxable income. That is taxable income. Yeah, you're getting something.
Oh, well,
so
call your accountants.
Hopefully, you have accountants. I would hope you have accountants
for this. I would definitely.
The education plan. This is a question that I had. If you leave the USFL, apparently, if you stay enrolled continuously in each quarter, they're going to continue to cover your education. That's an added benefit. That's awesome. So let's say that if you got cut from the USFL and you wanted to finish your degree, as long as you're continuously enrolled and never take a break, they will continue to pay for your education. And I'm sure that they don't pay much. I'm sure it's kind of like a deal they've worked out with the university, where they give you a very discounted rate on that education. But it's cool nonetheless to know that, if it didn't work out the USFL and they cut you, if you want to get your degree, it's going to be free of charge. Just stick with it.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine getting cut and then they're like, "Oh, actually, now you're kicked out of school too." So, you see this the image likeness and all that. I didn't know what this means. Every player assigned to the USFL give it to the USFL? Then your name, image, and license while you're in the league.
They don't even let you do that in the NCAA now. Like NCAA is allowing you to do whatever you want with your name, image, and likeness. And the USFL wants you to like sign over your name, image, and is that what I'm reading?
That's what I'm reading. This is copied from the article. So if this is misprinted, but every player assigned to the USFL his individual name, image, and likeness rights for merchandising, endorsements, promotions, and practice event game footage.
So if you're in the NCAA, if you're in college football and you're thinking, I should go play pro and make $45,000 a year that'll be taxed out the ass from, why don't I just stay in college and I can control my name, image, and likeness? Now that becomes a debate that like a 20-year-old kid has, and like, do I stay in college and profit off my NIL, or do I take it to the USFL and let them profit off it for me?
Oh, it's very interesting. Yeah, it's very much like a WWE mentality. Also here, every player is obligated to stand during the national anthem. Bringing that back. Like the hot button topic on that is that there used to be a point in time where players would stay in the locker room in the NFL games while the national anthem was playing. Why not bring that completely back so that no one focuses on that? It's just a conservative talking point. Yeah, it's just a conservative talking point. I wouldn't get involved with it, but I'm just surprised that was specifically noted in here. Mike has some notes on ownership, and we have a couple quotes coming up here from Brian Woods and stuff. They feel that Birmingham, which obviously makes sense with being in Birmingham, but then Houston and New Jersey are maybe some of the first teams that are going to have secure ownership groups. This is from Mike, and then Brian talks about Pittsburgh coming up. Remember New Jersey? They were kind of talking the Alex Rodriguez thing, right? I think that is still a stretch, but obviously there's tons of New York and New Jersey celebrities. Houston has been in line for a long time. They've been talking about ownership, and then obviously Birmingham that they have. That would be like the first one you would sell off, I would think.
Easily. Lachlan Murdoch, son of Rupert Murdoch, is talking USFL and help for the NFL on the earnings call this week. He said the NFL has helped Fox think through structure and rules of play for the USFL, but they control the digital rights. He also says outside investors in the league have effectively underwritten the league for the next 2 or 3 years. The company is ambitious but disciplined in its investment in the USFL.
Do you think that NFL has helped Fox think through structure? Like it really sounds like they're working like the Eric Shanks is calling up like NFL and being like, "Hey, what do you guys think we should do with this?"
I mean, it's smart for the NFL because they're basically there's all these players that especially if that contract allows a player to be like, look, I signed an NFL contract. It's kind of like a developmental league. Like that's always the way these spring leagues should work. It's kind of like a developmental for the NFL. Like you get you tune and stuff like that. And I know Arash craps on Taylor Heineke, but look what we're talking about here. Moving forward, the USFL EVP Ed Hartman talks XFL and why Fox was interested in spring football and more.
Do you think it's weird? And I said this, that the USFL is doing Super Bowl Media Row this year. Nary a word of XFL.
I don't think it's weird because the XFL is not, there's another year before the XFL kicks off.
I mean, 6 months ago, I would have been shocked if you would have said that the XFL wasn't doing Media Row.
Patience is what we're playing with here. And we're just trying to be patient so that we want the best possible XFL, right? That's what we all want. So if we're patient with it, then like this lack of news that's trickling out, maybe they're just getting it right. Maybe they're just trying to get this right because the USFL seems a little rushed. It still feels rushed to me. It still feels rushed.
63 days, I think, when this airs.
Still feels rushed.
Yeah, I actually watched this. I watched this live. Mark sent this over. Mark Perry. Ed was on. He was talking misconception. Don't tell Arash this. It's a misconception. The XFL was a failure last time around. The ratings. I did think this was true. The ratings in the 3 weeks that were around before COVID. Ed, it was around for 5 weeks. It was around for 5 weeks, not 3 weeks. Before COVID, outright exceptional. It was outrating the NBA for those 3 weeks. It was 5 weeks. Based on that and based on other research, we're very confident there's a strong demand. Research. Okay, it was 5 weeks. I think the lesson we learned from previous leagues is that you need to keep your costs in check, and that's why they're doing the bubble. This is kind of standard play, whatever. If you have any thoughts on this, but then the next part, I think you're going to have thoughts about.
The question was asked how the USFL plans on connecting fans from the 8 locations to a team playing in Birmingham. He says, we think we've got a big tailwind given the USFL has so much equity value in it. kind of. On top of that, obviously, Fox has owned an off-road television station and affiliates in many markets. They still do. And so using those local television stations to help activate local fans is going to be one weapon we use on top of the USFL intellectual property. It's something we're super focused on. We think the combination of those two things and other tactics will make it possible to build out the local following, despite the fact that teams are playing in one market, at least for the first year. Okay.
Like we both were, and I put this on Twitter. We have both worked at local Fox, so what? Okay, we worked at them. How would we be used? And I was at Q13. How would Q13 be used if there was a Seattle USFL franchise to grow the fan base in Seattle? Like promos?
I guess.
With Q13, would they send a Seattle reporter to Birmingham to cover the thing?
No.
Right? Are they running?
It would. Here's what it would be. It would be one reporter in Birmingham doing all of the affiliate hits for all the local affiliates. That's what it would be. But
they're not doing Houston Gamblers highlights on the Houston.
They might, but it's something that maybe that there's a bureau where one reporter covers all the different teams for all the different affiliates. I don't know. I think it's very lofty. It's very ambitious to assume the local affiliates are going to run this content. I think it's presumptuous.
I also think it's odd that anybody that you're trying to attract with a new USFL is not watching local news.
No.
Or watching local Fox TV. They're watching their streaming stuff.
Maybe. I mean, the thing with Fox is, the interesting business plan with Fox is, outside of one market, Fox O&Os are all over the NFC teams. So there's 16 NFC teams, right? And 16 AFC teams. Fox O&O owns 15 out of the 16 NFC teams' local affiliates. The only one they don't own is Charlotte. They gave that up when they wanted to get Seattle. So maybe they're betting on that.
It's just as weird. I think they think the sports betting is going to carry a lot of that. I don't know who you're attracting demographically, age-wise through local news. Harrison writes in a lot. I'm like, do you watch local news? He's like, no, I don't at all. I'm like, so how is this going to attract anything to you?
I don't know. Good question. A lot of stuff from Hartman here. He also talks about how sports betting fits this league. It's kind of another part of our thesis to building this out. If you look at the initial teams we picked out of all the U.S., it's no fluke that over half of those teams are in legal or they have names that are based in legal betting states.
Yeah, working on that. He also talks merch is coming soon. Woods talked about this too. They say merch is coming. I think right after the draft, we're going to get some merch. Hopefully we're going to get some uniform stuff. Woods was on KDKA in Pittsburgh talking about that actually Pittsburgh could be one of the first teams that could be moving out, but they still need to figure out a home location, something the league has not started to process yet. That is odd to me.
Why wouldn't you process that now? Why wouldn't you be processing that before you even talk about the USFL?
Right. Brian, why wouldn't you be talking about that now?
Come on,
man. They need to look into local investors, right? I mean, I get all that, but this jump from 1 to 2 is going to be hard. I think it's going to be a lot harder than people think.
I think it's going to be 2 years, I think, in that Birmingham situation, if I'm being honest. Yeah. Moving forward, let's see here. Mike Mulvihill talking USFL on Outkick 360. Great Outkick. I'm glad that we're covering Outkick. He says that we put some care into the decision of when to launch the league. What's the right part of the calendar to launch the league? The XFL and AF, they chose to launch immediately after the Super Bowl. We've decided not to do that. We're going to kick off on April 16th, the same weekend that the FCF kicks off.
And so, they're avoiding the Olympics, March Madness, Masters, right? He thinks they can go up against the Premier League, Major League Soccer, PGA, and the NHL.
Premier League.
You think
you can't go against Premier League? Nope. I don't think you can.
No.
There's a lot of American soccer fans that watch the Premier League religiously. There's a lot of people that are Chelsea, Man U, Man City. Not so many Tottenham fans, which makes me sad. But there's a lot of Americans watch British soccer because it's the top league. It's like the NFL to us, where all these other leagues, no disrespect, don't garner the attention and the athletes the NFL does. The same thing goes for British soccer, the Premier League. That's why a lot of people in America still watch Premier League soccer. So good luck going against them.
I just have one more thought on this, and then we can touch a break. I am really torn on this XFL February start or the USFL April start. That like what they're getting the benefits, right? Avoiding some of these, he calls them tentpole events. I think coming right after the Super Bowl, you can play those ads every week. Like imagine right now, the ads are playing like every week, and then okay, next week it's starting, right? Like it's they're kicking off the weekend.
No lull. There's no lull.
I like that a lot better than like, okay, we're going to see you in 2 months.
You're completely right.
Like I get them avoiding the things. I understand. That's why I'm really torn on it. I'm not saying one is right or the other, but I do think this 2-month window where like, oh yeah, remember that ad I saw back in December?
I think what they're doing is they're trying to avoid football burnout. But Americans love football, so why wouldn't you jump right on that?
Yeah.
Especially knowing what you know about FCF, launching the same flipping weekend that you are.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway. Let's take it over to our guests this week. Of course, Mike Mitchell, Nathan Rourke, and Rob Vanstone. We're gonna do some commercial ads real quick, and then we're gonna toss to them, and we'll come back and we'll talk some CFL news.
Well, I would tell you, this is rare. I don't normally let people call into the show, but when you're someone that's important as Mike Mitchell, you have as much important information as Mike Mitchell does, we'll let you do a phoner. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Reed, for having me on, and thanks for making the accommodation and breaking your rules.
Well, no, I mean this. I felt because you said I'm out of town, I'm working, I'm on the road. I said the information that you have is valuable enough that just your spoken word is good enough for me tonight.
Thanks. I'll try to live up to that billing. Thank you.
So Paul and I, we're going to go through all the details that you posted, right? That came out, the USFL player contracts. We're going to break all that stuff down. So I don't want to kind of rehash, what you've written. I want to rehash kind of what you think about what you've written. Takeaways from your article, having gone through the USFL player handbook and contract with all the salary and everything else.
Them accounting, the USFL accounting for the presence of the XFL is fascinating to me. There's still a lot of people that doubt the XFL, doubt what type of league it's going to be, because let's face it, they have a lot to live up to because the league in 2020 was very good. And so they had rock stars in that league that were running it. So, but the fact that the amount of respect shown towards the XFL in terms of a non-compete clause and the salaries are respectable. The USFL is competing against itself in a sense because there's no other football league out there, pro football league out there during the spring at the moment that were, a lot of people in the industry, a lot of people I talk to, agents, players, they didn't really expect the salaries to be in that range. I'm not saying, 45K is 100K, but for those of us who followed the spring league, the expectation level was pretty low in terms of the range of salaries. So I would say the win bonus structure is a positive. It's something I've loved since the original XFL back in 2001 and something that was implemented in 2020. So I'm glad the USFL has that. Their salaries are respectable, but as people who've read my article at xflnewshub.com know, there are certain little provisions and little things there that are a little bit questionable.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. Yeah, and it's interesting, the player stuff, because it's hard. It's a good number for what we were expecting. I know, like, listener Van, right? I'm sure he's talked to you too. Like, generally, these players all need to get paid more just because, you are working the whole year, even though you're only playing for 2 months. You're still preparing yourself and doing all that. So, like, I want to say that, like, Van and people like that, like, I hear you, right? Yes, they should all be paid more compared to what the spring league was or what I think people feared that this was going to be. It is better than that, correct?
It is. And because there are two layers to it. Number one, do they have a respectable enough salary where people won't just bypass their league and say, well, that's just too low? And can they lock in players and draw in players to their league so that they can prevent them from going to the XFL? And I think USFL with their option year has structured in a way where they might have players that come into the league that are unknowns that turn out to be stars. And they don't mind risking losing them to the NFL, but they don't want to see somebody be a star for the Houston Gamblers and then just jump ship to the Roughnecks or whatever their team name is going to be. So in Houston, there, if the XFL is in fact in Houston,
a lot of
story for another time.
A lot of if, ands, or buts. Yeah, people are. Max is furiously typing. Houston Roughnecks confirmed. No,
but you can kind of see the strategy behind it. It's a sound business decision because you sense with the numbers that they understand the potential presence of the XFL. Because they could have very easily, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but they could have very easily offered a salary that was more in the 20K range. And the sad reality is that a lot of these players, especially the ones you'll see a lot of the guys in the draft pool that are former spring league guys. And a lot of these guys don't have any other options and they will take it because let's face it, in the spring league last spring, players played in that league for nothing. Or there were some cases where guys actually paid fees. So this is a massive improvement from that. So there are a lot of players because there are no opportunities out there in the States that will take whatever you give them. The fact that which is a shame, but it is what it is. But the fact that they're offering a good standard contract for a first-year league tells me that they're anticipating another league on the horizon. And with all due respect, I don't think they're thinking about FCF.
Watch your mouth. Watch your mouth, Mike Mitchell.
I like what FCF does. There's some tweaks I would do personally if I was running it, but they have a pretty a fascinating and interesting business model that could actually work. And I think they're doing some fun, interesting things for what it is. Indoor football with gimmicks and all that. That's fine. But I don't think the USFL, what it's doing is, protecting against FCF. And I don't think what they're doing is, with all due respect to Murtha and that ownership group, we'll see what happens with Major League Football. I don't think they're really concerned with Major League Football. I think the concern here is the unknown because we don't know what's going to happen and what it's going to be like. But the unknown is Redbird Capital, The Rock, Danny Garcia, and the oncoming XFL.
The money they're offering, do you believe that soundly enough to really draw in big name players? I know we've had some leaked names, right? And like Google Sheets and things, these players have, publicly said they're in the draft pool. There's really been nothing that has blown me away yet, right? Of anyone. And that's no disrespect, but you got to have some names to market around. We've heard there's going to be names to market around. Is 45,000, and I want to get into the room and board in a minute, but 45,000 minus all that, do you believe that's enough to draw big names?
You might be able to draw some players. I think the USFL's aim is to target the young, inexperienced pro players or college players. We'll see how that goes. Like transfer portal players. So I think if they were targeting, I don't think they're going to be targeting anyone like Colin Kaepernick, for example, or anybody like that. You're not going to lure those types of veteran players who are accustomed to making six figures or more, into the league for 40K. So I think the type of player they're targeting is a lot different than some other leagues in the past that, have presented, like the XFL, presented six-figure salaries to veteran players like Josh Johnson to get them to come in and play for their league and agree to a contract where they weren't allowed to go to the NFL with like the Detroit Lions a few years back when Josh Johnson agreed with the XFL. So I think they'll have a hard time enticing the veteran name recognition players that mainstream football fans know. And I don't know if that's their target. I do think they're going to need to, and they might be able to track some players of this variety. They're going to need to sign on players who have name recognition, who the mainstream football fan would know, whether that would be, now he's signed with the Toronto Argonauts, but someone like a Chad Kelly, someone who has name recognition, was a star in college, is young, and hasn't quite received the opportunity to play in the National Football League. You're going to need to get players like that kind of move the needle. I've seen the list of the players. I'm aware of a lot of the players that are in the current database, which is supposed to be whittled down to about 500. So those players, I know them, a lot of good players, a lot of players that play in the AAF, XFL, Spring League, all that. But, with all due respect, a lot of those guys don't have the cachet that some other players would have.
It's one of those things where, like you said, in different alternate football league, like the XFL, I hate, I don't like always, it's just the easiest one to kind of use as an example. But, the AAF too, well, we're going to pay up for a couple of people, right? We're going to pay up. We're going to make exceptions. And, we go back and forth, you and I and everyone, with the Brian Woods and a lot of the people involved in this, dealings with them, online, offline, everything in between. Nothing about that strikes me as them being any sort of organization that is like, yeah, we're going to make an exception for these 5 players, even though I really, really think they should, like a Chad Kelly or some of the other names, excuse me, we've seen floating around. I think that is something they should consider doing. I do not see them doing that at all, knowing what I know so far.
And I agree. And, and there's an argument too for targeting younger players that maybe not everybody knows. We'll look back to the XFL, Jordan Teamu and PJ Walker, they had somewhat of a name. Both of them in college were very good. And PJ really was good at Temple. And these guys, some people knew them, but they weren't like a known veteran player like Matt McGloin. But at the end of the day, PJ Walker and Jordan Teamu, those were success stories. And those are young guys that didn't really get a chance. And Matt McGloin was a veteran. He had some name recognition, but unfortunately, he didn't perform very well. So there's an argument to be had that let's go for the younger guys with untapped potential versus the guys that we kind of know, are standard functional players, but they really don't have any upside to be superstars.
Matt McGloin, to be fair, he performed off the field well with the yelling, right, with the interviews and all that. It wasn't on the field. He needed to have it both ways.
Good guy, and he had a nice background and in college, and he was a decent backup in the National Football League, and he actually got recommended by Andy Reid to the New York Guardians coaching staff because they had ties to the Chiefs. And so, McGloin was a decent backup NFL veteran quarterback. And that kind of guy, to get him in your league, you have to pay him 6 figures. So it kind of made sense to look for a veteran that can be stable, that knows how to run an NFL offense or a pro offense and all that, has experience. But I think it's better to shoot for the PJ Walker types, the Taylor Heineke types, guys who are stars in college, but for whatever reason, height, weight, whatever the case may be, they didn't really get an opportunity in the National Football League to get on the field and play. And then I like that strategy better. So from a salary aspect, I don't know, I'll just throw in a random NFL player. Sure, you could go after maybe a Mike Glennon if he's a free agent, but pay him 6 figures. I'm not a Mike Glennon guy. I'm not suggesting that. People know who he is, right? But I would much rather, the USFL go after a Jamie Newman or some young quarterback out there. CFL's making some smart moves with JT Barrett signing, but a quarterback in that kind of realm who hasn't really got an opportunity in the National Football League, but has a lot of talent and that people know. You and I, who are diehard football fans, and I find that people who are fans of the XFL or supporters or who follow these leagues are the purest football fans because, I'm the kind of person, I can speak for myself, that when I was 7 years old, used to sit down and do mock drafts and write down 12 rounds. And I'm the football video game guy. And that's the reason why I'm such a fan and advocate of leagues like this. But the mainstream casual football fan, they don't, they know the name players. They don't, from the big schools, from the SEC, from all that, from the NFL, they're not necessarily wrapped up. And so it's kind of a interesting dichotomy of trying to attract. You and I are going to be watching the USFL no matter what because we're diehard, pure football fans. But to attract the mainstream football audience, you're going to need some players that have cachet. Whether or not the USFL can pull those people in, I know that Fox is thinking we'll present a great TV football product, and the concept is what we're selling more so than the players. I don't know if that strategy is going to work out because you do need some players that people know and care about.
Yeah, two things. The JT Barrett thing is concerning, that signing with the CFL, because that is someone that was in the spring league system, right? That you're like, well, if anyone was going to, move over to the USFL, right, it would be someone like him. Fox is in the, like, we're selling pizza model. Like, people like football, they're going to eat it, even if it's not the best, and just, I do think they're banking a little bit more, too much on that. It's just like, well, people like football. Of course they're going to watch. Of course they're going to bet. It's like, well, yeah, but if we don't know any of these guys, like, I mean,
you also need to present a league differently than the NFL. You want to have a lot of the core elements that people love about the NFL, because the NFL is the greatest. It's a tremendous product. But you also want to try to attempt to, anyway, do things better than the NFL does it. Mm-hmm. Like, if you go to a diehard NFL fan, what are some things you wish the NFL would do with their game, with their rules, etc.? And whatever those answers are, that's the type of pro league you should try to run. And that's one of the aspects, there were many, but one of the aspects that I loved about the XFL, transparency, social media, the way they embrace the game, all the care and effort that went into all the rules and everything they did. It was a cool and fun and engaging product. And it wasn't gimmicky or any of that stuff. So I think the USFL needs a few hooks. It doesn't have to be a gimmicky league, but you can't just have a standard blasé football league that's not fresh or innovative or cool. And so I haven't seen that yet. I like the last two commercials the league has done. They're nice. They're fine, right?
Yeah, they're TV executives. Like, those should be good commercials. Like, that should be I mean, that doesn't mean and I'm not saying it's not going to be a good league, but Fox TV executives putting together 2 30-second funny, compelling commercials does not a football league make. Like, that is the bare minimum that they should be able to do. Like, that is what, I mean, you are advertising people, Yeah,
I totally agree with you. I feel like we'll see now. I mean, there's still time for them, but to reel people in, you have to be innovative, fresh, and new and fun. And if they're just a standard football product, I don't think it's going to be an effective strategy as far as I'm concerned. If you're just presenting a straight, bland product with no soul. And, so even, people criticize a lot of these leagues that failed in the past, but they all had something about them. Even the crazy XFL back in 2001 had the revolutionary spider cam that's in every sporting event now. That was a cool new way to watch games, and now it exists for every football game that you watch. They had sideline access and audio access and all this stuff. So there were aspects of it that were fun and new and original and unique that have stood the test of time. And the USFL has to try, like the recent XFL version, to engage with their fan base, not just the diehard football fan, but the sports fan as well. And they did such a great job. The XFL did such a phenomenal job with social media too. And USFL is in the early stages here. We're getting closer to the starting point, but they haven't really embraced the diehard football fan or embraced the fan base, going beyond coaches drawing on pads or wearing polo shirts. So we'll see if that progresses in the coming weeks and months. But at the moment, kind of bare bones, like a lot of aspects of the league.
Mike, you took the words out of my flipping mouth. I was going to say, talking about social media, I watched Skip Kirby draw the Stallions logo today. I don't know what you're talking about. They don't have, I don't know who is in the draft. They're not streaming the draft. My tweet about them not streaming the draft got more play than anything I've tweeted in the last 2 months. If you want to talk about, except for The Rock saying that the XFL was going to have more, the new cities, new teams, whatever. Like, my tweet about the USFL not airing not streaming or airing their draft got more impressions than anything I've tweeted since that. If that wants to give anybody listening, any idea of well, nobody really cares. It's 134,000 people watched the XFL draft. Okay, it was 8 hours and it was snooze and it was ever, but at the end of the day, I am kind of tired of this, we don't need to cater to the hardcore football fans because we have them, right? We're trying to get the casuals. as someone that's watched wrestling for my whole life, like, who do you think gets new people to watch wrestling? It's the hardcore people that are like, hey, Jim, come over and watch this match. It's the people, right, with the XFL, like, oh, hey, what's going on? I had my Dragons hat on at the Kraken game last night. People are like, oh, yeah, like, I remember that. Like, is that coming back? Oh, yeah, it's coming back. You know, we don't know if
I've had so many people that were anti-XFL leading into like 6 months before the XFL debuted in 2020 that were anti. And I mean, people were huge sports fans, and little by little, they became curious and more curious, and they liked what they heard and saw leading in. And then when the product debuted, they were pleasantly surprised and happy with the product that they saw, and they enjoyed the league. And that was the early stages of a first-year league, so there was going to be some peaks and valleys, and they were going to build up. But the XFL just did a great job of like not only embracing the diehard football fans, but also, you know, luring people in. And then the people who were lured in saw that this is a fun and cool product. And hey, they got some good football players in this league too. I mean, to this day, 2 years later, the XFL only played 5 weeks and they've got 30 players playing in the National Football League. So, and they only played 5 weeks. They didn't have like a full season or 2 seasons to get more tape and more film and get better as younger players. So that tells you something about the quality of that league. And they had rock stars in that league. Like, no disrespect to who's involved with the USFL right now, but they don't have anybody like a Sam Schwartzstein or an Eric Galco. Those two guys were rock stars. You see what Galco just did with the East-West Shrine Bowl, and Sam Schwartzstein and his entire team there was phenomenal with the XFL. So we'll see what Darryl Johnston and Brian Woods and they all do. But if you're going to run a vanilla football product, bare bones, so far, the expectation of them being a bare bones type of league, that's holding up. It takes a lot more to just being on Fox and NBC. There are plenty of products and programs that are on Fox and NBC that don't get any play or interest or from anyone. So just being on those networks doesn't, you know, there's plenty of infomercials on Saturday afternoons on Fox that nobody is watching. So you're going to need to be more than that.
It struck me this week, in talking, you know, because obviously Fan Control Football is kicking off the exact same day. I will never understand like how in the world that is happening, but it's like you have the Fan Control Football guys are like the crypto NFT, right? Like Patrick Deese is like 30, sure. Right? I mean, he's younger than me, right? Patrick's like 30. They're like, okay, we're gonna NFTs and like they're in their echo chamber, right? Of like, you know, we got to make this video game. Like, we don't need to listen to anybody else. Like, we know what we're doing. They're all in their same echo chamber. Like, yeah, that's good. Like, ballers. Yeah, let's get all this stuff. And then on the other side, you have the USFL guys. And it's, you know, a bunch of older, you know, men primarily, right?
Right.
And like they're TV executives and they know like about that world. Like you said, we're going to build this, we're going to put together a great TV commercial, all that. And they're in their world too of like, well, we don't need, like, we know how to make a TV show. Like, we don't need to worry about like league building. We don't need to worry about like, you know, like, what do people care about? You know, drafts, uniforms, like all the things that people care about. Like, well, we don't, you know, we're just going to like show one of them in a commercial and like, maybe that's a uniform. Maybe it's not. Like, we don't even care because we're just making a TV commercial. And it's literally like the same kind of mentality on both sides. Like, they're just so stuck in their ways.
Ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's just really weird to me that they're like, my frustrations with the FCF are very much my frustrations with the USFL. Like, I think you would do well to listen to outside perspectives than the like 55-year-old, you know, rich TV executives that you have like kind of running the things that are going on. Sorry for my
it's a good rant. You know, I've been fortunate enough to talk to people within the industry that look at both of those entities that you mentioned, FCF and USFL, and who have positive opinions about the financial structure of both. Like what you just mentioned with Fan Control Football, a lot of people I talk to, they think those guys are going to hit on something there with the NFTs and all that. And the lane they're in, they're going to do pretty well in. I don't doubt that Patrick Deese and that crew is going to do a good job with that. They're serving a niche. USFL believes with their financial model that, and I feel like this is probably the case too. I know a lot of people doubt these leagues. And we'll see what kind of product the USFL puts out there because there's a lot of stuff about their football aspect, their limited roster, limited amount of time to get ready, all that. that I feel that might hinder the quality of the football that we see in weeks 1, 2, 3, and beyond. But I do believe with the USFL that they're going to be around they're not going to go down after one season because their financial model is set up as such where they're not going to be in the red bleeding to death like most of these leagues usually are. So whether long term they're able to present a product that lures people in and keeps people and keeps interest, that remains to be seen. They're going to need to do it. They haven't done it from the football aspect yet. Polo shirts and coach drawings aside, they haven't done it from the football aspect yet. But from a TV aspect, they're going to need to present. They're going to need to present a football game different than we've ever seen it before for them to entice people to continue to watch. If they're not going to put in the effort in terms of luring the football crowd in, when they do get the mainstream and the casual people to sample their product, you have to turn on their telecast on Fox and NBC and go, "Wow, I've never seen football presented in this fashion. What an innovation!" I don't know if they're going to have any, tricks up their sleeves, so to speak, to say this is stuff we want to do with the NFL, but now we can do it with our own league. So perhaps they can introduce some new cameras, some new audio work, some new innovations in terms of the production that can revolutionize the industry. Maybe I'm giving them a little bit too much credit, but they're going to need a lot more than that. But perhaps that's what they have in store. I do think, and I know a lot of people think this is ridiculous, and this will probably not age well. I do think the USFL is going to be around for a few seasons because I believe that they have the financial model to withstand, because they're not going to take a lot of hits financially. So I think they'll survive. Whether or not they can thrive, that's another story.
Should go into the money financial aspects of it, should the USFL have said it was a $35,000 base salary and just included player room and board? Like, and avoided all of this, like,
yeah, all the negativity that's surrounding the fact that they're
like, if they just would have said
unless they change it, unless there are certain aspects of their player handbook and their rules that can be changed at the sole discretion of the league, I would suggest to them that they do cover their players so they don't have any of those issues. But I like I mentioned in my article, I don't know. I know it's been reported by a lot of great reporters and writers out there, like Roy Johnson and other people that are in Alabama, that there are specific deals in place and promises and guarantees. I don't know the specifics behind those, but I don't know if the reason for them not covering housing for players has anything to do with any promises that they've made to local hotels or any businesses, any companies they're doing business with over there. But yeah, I suppose they could have done that. I mean, I'd have to sit down and be honest with you. I'd have to sit down and do the math of what that would cost the league, 360 players over whatever it may be, a 3-month span covering hotels and meals and incidentals and all that. There's also travel that's going to be involved, which I'm sure, not to bore people to death with this stuff, but I'm sure the USFL can set up deals with local Ubers or travel agencies or whatever the case may be, busing and all that to accommodate players and coaches and whoever else needs to get to facilities and stadiums. So, but yeah, there are a lot of aspects that when I was able to get access to the contracts and look at some of the different things that are in play, and weren't so favorable.
$3.24 million for 360 players, 60 nights at $150 a night plus whatever. So I mean, it's not a non-zero. I just when you came out, because we had just they come out last week, and we had got the leaks from USFL News on Twitter. It kind of put together the preliminary numbers, right, and then you were getting everything the next day, and I was floored that they weren't. I never once gave any thought that the room and board wasn't included, because they had negotiated those deals with the city. That I'm like, they owe the city 40,000 room nights, whatever that financial number is. Right. But that's it just never even made sense to me that they're like, well, of course they're paying for that. Like, they're in a bubble. They've negotiated these hotel rooms. That was a shock to me when that came out. I just couldn't believe that they were like, are you going to have 360 players with credit cards on file? Right? Like, are we going to?
Yeah, and I've had a lot of this information for 2 weeks now, and I had to wait. A lot of times with information that I get, I have to wait sometimes before I can go public with it. There's several different hurdles that are involved sometimes. And I do my own legwork, even when I get information, do my own digging to confirm. So I was surprised, as you mentioned, as well, when I saw that. But considering that, we've known for a long time now, the USFL made it official recently. We've known for a long time that they're going to Birmingham. I've been talking about the hub thing with the entire USFL since last summer. Even before that, before they started the TSL season last spring. But we've known about Birmingham, but there were some hurdles for them in finalizing their deal. That's why they didn't announce it when they did. And in all the articles that people have read about the USFL's deal with Birmingham, there was some trepidation. There was some last second dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's and all those other cliches. So when you see things like, hotel deals and designated hotels and everything, and there's still details that need to come out about, the housing in particular, in terms of whether or not players can share rooms at designated hotels or not.
That's a big difference.
I don't know that. Yeah. So I don't know that for sure. So the league has gotten in touch with me, and people close to the league have gotten in touch with me about certain aspects. And so the education program and everything else. And that's some things that I've updated in the article itself. So yeah, it's what we don't know for sure. There's a lot of details out there, is the specific deals that have been made between Fox and Birmingham. A lot of assurances and guarantees had to be made in order for this league to happen.
I was going to ask you the USFL response, but I want to save that to the end. It's not lost, and I'm sure Paul is already ranted about this in the section that we're recording, before this interview. But I mean, the second I sent all this to Paul, it's like, it's not lost on us that, the spring league still owes money for these hotel rooms in Indianapolis in the sum of $1.4 million. It's just weird now that, and I know it's not all the same, and I know, but it's just weird.
One way to avoid. I'll say it for you, I guess.
Okay.
One way to avoid having issues paying hotel fees and bills is to
don't do it.
Not
give it to someone.
Don't pay it. And another way to ensure hotels' business is to not cover those costs for 360 of your players. So, I know there are workarounds. I still don't know all the details around that. There are workarounds for players. Players will find a way. Live together, Airbnbs, local housing in Birmingham, little connections here or there. Maybe you have some players that went to school in Alabama that can have some hookups. So there are workarounds there. I was fearing the worst, that I was going to hear that the USFL was going to mandate that people stayed at their hotels. I didn't hear any of that, but that would be awful. But your point is valid, or Paul's, or whomever, as far as what transpired with the spring league in Indianapolis. So like I said, theoretically, one way to avoid not paying bills on a hotel is to make the players do it themselves.
It's weird. Last question. We obviously could talk forever about all this, but last question tonight. It's late for you. It's getting late for me. Obviously, there was reaction, right? All this information coming out, right? Which is weird that maybe they didn't anticipate all this would come out, right? The league, and they didn't. Right, think that the player. It's like you knew the second the first player was like, sign my contract. All my private DMs are like, we got to get a hold of this thing. So we knew it was coming out. But league reaction to your article. Last question for me.
Yeah, so I have a lot of conversations with people that are close to these leagues and that are inside these leagues, and I was expecting some blowback, and surprisingly favorable.
Good. Okay.
Good. Because quite frankly, everything I wrote was factual. So there's nothing really I expanded upon the education portion, which players can, as long as they stay enrolled in each quarter with universities that are giving them the debt-free education, players don't necessarily have to be with the USFL. Or if they leave the USFL, they can continue on their free program education, which was a little something that I was concerned about. And I reached out to the league to find that out for sure. I didn't want to hear that, player leaves the USFL and all of a sudden he no longer has that benefit.
Or you get
his
cut.
bachelor's.
You get cut. And
you can't fit it now. All of a sudden you can't finish your associate's degree that was promised and all that. So I wanted to make sure of that aspect for players. So that's good to hear. It's been, I've written some, and I've done this in the past, full disclosure, I've written articles about the XFL in the past where people in the XFL reached out to me and maybe felt that I was a little too harsh in my criticisms or what I wrote and what have you. And so it's great that people in these leagues are reading these articles and that they're paying attention to what's being put out there and said and written. So the interactions sometimes are interesting. Obviously, from inside a company, there's a little bit of, they're on the defensive. And so they will question your motivations when you're writing about things. So yeah, it's a fascinating process going through all this. And, I operate in the shadows, and sometimes when I step out of those shadows with my hands filled with information, sometimes people have their doubts or have their criticisms. And certainly when I came out with the contract details at xflnewshub.com, I got quite a few people who said, "Are you sure, Mike? This doesn't seem right." So, so it is. So, so that's just the way it goes. But yeah, you and I, we cover these leagues very closely and in depth, and it's a fascinating process behind the scenes and behind the curtain.
Yeah, well, it's we talk to some of the same people. I'm sure you talk to more people than I talk to, but at least some of the people I talk to, as long as it's factually accurate to the T, they're okay with it, right? Like, I kind of have a vibe of a little bit like it has to be 100% accurate, but they're like, okay, like, well, I'll let that go. So I'll
admit it. Sometimes the tone might not be as favorable. Sometimes there could be issues with what can be perceived as conjecture from time to time, but the facts are the most important thing, always.
Well, I'm glad that they reach out to you because I have lots of talks every week, both on this show and on Twitter, and I never hear from diddly squat. So I'm glad that someone is reaching out. But I know that people at the USFL had favorable things to say about one of our past interviews. So hopefully they'll be listening to this as well. So anyway, Mike, you're doing the Lord's work, late night, East Coast, on the road, phone calling in. I'm imagining where you are because I'm staring at just your stock photo of you on Zoom. I'm imagining like you're behind a bush somewhere out in the wilderness calling in right now from your travels.
I'm outside of Coach's house right now. Yeah. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say this before we wrap this up. I just want to say this to everyone out there. I wish Josh Davis was around for this stuff. I miss him, and not to end on a somber note, but I think about him a lot. And so, and when I'm thinking about the USFL kicking off and whatever happens with the XFL, we'll wait and see, which could be coming soon. But I know everybody's waiting on that. But I during this period with all this craziness going on, and Josh had close ties to, FCF and Major League Football and people involved in the USFL. And I miss him, and I hope he's watching this process. Love you, brother.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, it's all coming together here. I tweeted this week. I said, if you had told me 6 months ago that the USFL would be doing Radio Row at the Super Bowl and not the XFL, you knocked me over with a feather. So, but this is the way the world turns, and I wish that Josh had been involved in all of this along the way. It's been very good.
Yeah, and then there's so many players reach out to me still, talking about Josh, asking about him and all that stuff, asking about his family, close loved ones, all that. And it's, and they really appreciate it. I'm more of a secretive behind the scenes kind of guy. And he was out and in the open and very friendly with everybody. So I wish he was part of this whole run, but he's watching from somewhere. So this is going to be fascinating the next few months. I appreciate you having me on, Reed.
It's good. Yeah. Someone suggested when you came on in December, they go, you need to have Mike on every month. I'm like, well, we can't speak for Mike to do that. But I do think a little bit more. But these targeted, I'm a fan of the targeted, like, article. Let's talk to Mike. I think this is good. This is a good spot. So,
yeah, should have something coming out soon about the XFL. That should be an interesting piece too. We'll see the blowback on that one.
As long as it is not tomorrow when this episode airs, or you have my blessings to release it whenever you want.
And by the way, I'm loving CFL free agency. This is your coverage of the CFL is terrific, and maybe you can have Chad Kelly on in the future. I think he's such a great story. And it's going to be fun to watch him progress in the Canadian Football League. So it's great to be a football fan for sure.
It's good. Yeah, CFL free agency matters too. There's a lot of talk about the USFL. That was the title of the episode this week. I said CFL free agency is greater than or equal to USFL free agency. There's a lot of chatter right now. We have Kenny Lawler.
It's definitely. I'm sorry. It's definitely greater.
No, that's what I'm saying. At a minimum, it is equal to. But it is definitely greater than or equal to when like Kenny Lawler signing 300,000 jumping ship and all this. It's interesting stuff. Mike, Ottawa, by the way, the Red Blacks, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Red Blacks are doing a phenomenal job, not just with their free agent signings, but engaging with their fan base. Like, take notes, people. Engaging with their fan base and presenting an interesting, hey, I'm on the Toronto side of the coin, but I got to admire what they're doing. Doesn't cost you a penny when you have a staff videographer. It is the best thing that they've done in the offseason, except for obviously bringing in their new GM and acquiring all that great talent is that, like, he's already there. Like, you guys are already doing this stuff. Just like put it out. USFL, air your draft. You're already doing it. Put up a cell phone in the corner. Mike, get out of here. We're going to go, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Reed. Thanks, brother.
Well, I am thrilled today. We have Nathan Rourke of the BC Lions, new starting quarterback. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Reed. Thanks for having me.
It's been a whirlwind, like 2 days in the CFL, whirlwind kind of 2 weeks for you, right? With everything going on. How has it been the last 2 weeks for you?
Yeah, it's been good. Not too much has changed. I've just gotten a lot of more people who want to talk to me. So that's all the only real adjustment for it. But I mean, it's been exciting news with free agency. You're starting to kind of see the pieces fall into place, and guys are getting excited. Texting with some of the guys, and they're getting excited as well. So really, for us, May can't come soon enough, and we're looking forward to getting started.
Now, to be fair with Matt Baker, we had talked about getting you on even before all this stuff was announced that you were the starting. We had Jake Mayer on last week from Calgary. I'm trying to hitch our wagon, right, to all of you, like, really good upcoming, right, quarterbacks. I don't care about the Bo Levi's of the world, right? I want the young guys that I can ride with for the next 5, 6 years. So I just want to make sure that that's understood.
No, I appreciate that. Someone's going to look out for us, right?
Yeah, you got. So, I mean, what was it like, getting, talking to the coach and finding out, and how did that all come about, being named the starter?
Yeah. Coach Campbell, one of the great things about him is that he tries to be super authentic and transparent. And he was that way last year, throughout the kind of the weeks of the uncertainty of Mike's injury, not knowing whether he would start or not. He was as transparent as he could be, and I really appreciate that about him. And this was no different. He called me on the weekend, said that Mike was looking at making a decision sometime in the next week to keep me posted. And then on Monday, had a conversation and let me know what he was thinking and how they were moving forward. So that's really how I found out.
And I mean, reactions to that. I mean, it's not every day, right? You find out someone that's been in the league forever, right, is retiring. You're taking their shoes, right? Or not, but at least filling that position, that role, right? I mean, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's still super surreal. Like, I honestly wasn't expecting it. I was talking with my family members and whatnot, and we kind of trying to understand what, where Mike was going to go and what was he going to do, and hadn't had any real communication. So I really had no idea. And everyone that I talked to at the organization really didn't think that they had any kind of clue. And so wasn't really sure what to think of it, and was then even more surprised that Coach Campbell made the decision that they were going to name me the starter right then and there. But I mean, obviously from that moment on, it was like, all right, well, this is what we got to do. And this is how it is. And that was it. So kind of hit the ground running with that. And, I'm super excited. This is what I've wanted since I've gotten here. Obviously you want to be the guy as soon as you step on the field or with a new organization. And I love the team here. I love the organization, the coaching staff, the players, and it's been really fun to have like a full off season and going into the camp this early, knowing that that this is the confidence that the organization has in me, and I'm looking forward to hitting the field and getting after it and showing that they made the right decision.
Because it's interesting, right? A lot has been made, limited, right? Played last year, limited tape. Sometimes you don't need, right? Sometimes you can just look at the player and know, right? I mean, I would almost say, and I don't want to ever throw any, other quarterbacks under the bus, right, in the CFL, but there's some guys floating around that like we've seen a lot of, and you're kind of hoping like, well, if they get in this good position, maybe this will work out, or they were in the wrong team before. But someone like you, they just didn't need a lot to really feel confident in going forward with you.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that fans might forget is that Mike didn't practice until our first bye week. Like he didn't practice during the week, which, hats off to him. The fact that it's unbelievable to me how good he is to not need practice and then play as well as he did in the beginning half of that season when he wasn't. And it was unbelievable when he practiced all week and then still know the game plan and go out and show out. So, but that opened up a tremendous opportunity for me to go in there and take reps against the CFL team, take reps with Lucky Whitehead and Brian Burnham, and who really make you elevate, whoever they're playing with. And, the rest of the guys that we had on that offense. And so I had tremendous reps, and that started day 3 of training camp. So I had a lot of reps in front of the coaches. I had a lot of reps where they got to see how I operated in the huddle and how I, played and performed with the ones. And as you might not have seen it out in the field, but Mike was playing great, at that point. And he still ended up playing amazingly this entire season. I don't want to make that sound like I'm slighting him or anything, yeah. But I was behind closed doors. I was getting opportunities to prove myself, and I'm not sure how much that went into the decision. I can't speak for them, but it was a little bit more than you might have seen on game day.
A lot of excitement's been had, right, about, you being a Canadian, right, taking the starting position, including, friend of our show and your friend Jim Mullen, right, very excited, right, to have, and now obviously with Michael O'Connor coming in, right, having a 1-2, I don't think has been done since the 40s. Jim was telling me in messages, right, of having a CFL team. Obviously we just want to play good football and you want to succeed, but knowing, right, that you're kind of taking that baton and showcasing, right, hey, Canadians can start and be, the main guy in the CFL. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think obviously very proud of that. I've all the time that I spent down in the States playing football, that's always what kind of separated me from the next guy, was being Canadian, and I always embraced that. I've always been very proud to have take the path that I've taken, and coming up to the CFL, I understood that it was going to be a big deal, and that media types like yourself are going to bring it up every interview and stuff like that. And that's just kind of part of it. But I'm proud of it. I don't see any reason why, quarterbacks in the past haven't got the same opportunities. But this is what it is. And the goal was never to come up here and to blaze any kind of trail. It's to help the BC Lions win football games. And that's still the mentality, but we can make some headway in some other aspect of the game. And then that's cool with me as well. And I'll be proud to be a part of that.
Now, not to add more pressure to this, but, the BC Lions are America's CFL team, right? This is known, right? Because, we are America's CFL podcast. So knowing that you have the hopes and dreams of America, right, and their team in the CFL as well, does that add any extra pressure at all to your plate heading into this season?
I just don't want to disappoint you guys, right? So I think absolutely tremendous weight has now been put on my shoulders. I think, it's cool. It's cool to be able to have, because I've been on a lot of stops in my football career. And there's a lot of places in the United States where now for some reason they're watching some CFL games, I'm sure. And so I do appreciate all the support of all the people that I've had the chance to connect with throughout the years and throughout the football journey. And it's cool to have it come full circle a little bit.
For people that don't know, right, the tremendous success you had in college as well, right, getting the Cornish Trophy twice, right, in 17 and 18. Talk about that, of just the importance of that, or being acknowledged, or what that meant to you. And obviously, I've gone back and forth with Jim Mullen about this as well, but just what that means as someone, playing in the league.
Yeah, I think it's a tremendous honor. I think it's such a cool idea to recognize Canadians in the NCAA. Again, it's just not one of those things where I went into Division I and I was like, this is what I want to do. But there's so much talent in the NCAA that are, they're from Canada. There was there was less at the time that I was entering college in the 2016 class. There was less talent as there is now, which I'm extremely proud of. The fact that now there seems to be a healthy crop of Canadians going down to the NCAA every year. I'm proud of the fact that my younger brother Curtis got to go to get a Division I scholarship right out of Canada, which I didn't get the opportunity to do, but he did, and I'm hoping that more kids are able to get the same opportunity. They don't have to go down to a prep school. And then, in the NCAA, we have athletes like I don't know his first name, but Mechie down in Alabama, who's having tremendous success, and talking about him being from Canada is kind of an afterthought because he's just such a good player. That kind of stuff is happening more and more, I'm super proud to be able to represent just a continually improving crop of Canadian football players in the NCAA who are continuing to make their mark, and I'm happy that seems to improve and just be a larger group every single year. That's really cool, and that's really special to me.
You have to be excited seeing, right, some of the signings that BC's making, Lucky Whitehead, we had him on a couple weeks ago, right? Brian Burnham, these talented offensive weapons, right, that you're going to get to be able to go out there and, hopefully compete for Grey Cup, right? What is it? You, I assume, are a fan, right, as well as a player, and just knowing that you're going to be able to go out there and work with all these guys. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's great. I think that the core of our offense is back, and that's huge. Just going back into the same offense for a second year, having a little bit of familiarity is very, very important. Obviously, having Burn and Lucky back is absolutely huge, not just for on the field stuff, but for our locker room. They're tremendous locker room influences. So hard workers, those two, and so that's huge, and just I think that the more people that we can have in the locker room that are just true pros and are bought into what we're trying to build here, the better. I really get that sense that Coach Rick and Neil McAvoy are making decisions that are not just best for what we're doing on the field and what we're trying to accomplish on the field, but what the vision is of the type of men that they're trying to bring in, and character, and all the great teams that I've been a part of have been made up of a lot of high character people, not just very, very talented people. I've been on some very talented teams that haven't done as well. And so it's exciting to kind of see these guys come in and go, okay, that, this is good for more than one reason. And they're making us a better football team on and off the field. That's important to us. And that's why the guys are so fired up. We're excited, and we can't wait to kind of see what we all look like on the field come May.
As a quarterback, right, you're in that leadership role in one way or another, right? There's some guys that are, more boisterous, some guys that are quiet confidence. How do you look at yourself in that role, and especially as a younger player, right, coming in, filling big shoes? How do you embrace that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that obviously you got to bring your own spin to it. I'm not going to be leading in the same way that Mike Riley was doing it last year. He's a very different person than I am, and a different personality. And I learned a lot from him in terms of how he interacts with people. But that's just not my personality. It's just different. And it's difficult, coming in last year, I didn't feel like I had as much of a voice because it was Michael's team. And I didn't want to, overstep, or I didn't want to say something to a vet and them not listen to me and stuff like that. So, what I did instead was I just put in the work. I treat people with respect, and set an example with my actions. And then people following after that or listening a little bit, that came. And so I feel like that doesn't really need to change. That's the type of person I am. I'm more than willing to say something if something needs to be said, but I'm a guy that's going to be able to put in the work. There's a quote when it comes to leadership that I rely on. In The Last Dance, Michael Jordan was talking about, he was saying that he never asked his teammates to do something that he wouldn't do or he hasn't done. And that's the way that I kind of look at it. I'm never going to ask somebody to do something that I haven't done already, or I haven't, or I'm not willing to do. And so that's the way that I look at it. I think it's difficult. Obviously, these guys are a lot older than I am, but if we can have the belief in each other that we're going after the right things, and we're going after the same things, and that our heart's in the right place, I think that will come.
At least for me looking from the outside, a lot of people in my Twitter spheres and groups, seems to be a lot of excitement in BC, right? Growing into we're making big moves, we're signing players, we're being aggressive, right? CFL free agency is excited. Do you sense that same excitement in the locker room, right, when you're talking with the team leaders?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have a lot of belief in in the organization first and foremost. I think that when Mr. Doman bought the team, there was a lot of excitement about his passion and his excitement and his commitment to the team. We just really hadn't had an identity before I got there. It's tough when you don't really have an owner who's involved like Mr. Doman is, and Mr. Doman is making some really big, powerful statements. Not only with his actions, with things that he's doing, and the guys love that. They're real big fans of his. And then with Neil and with Coach Rick, there's a lot of belief in what they're doing as well. And I think that the excitement building around the free agency is justified. And like I said, they're bringing in the right guys on and off the field, and we're excited about that. And they have a lot of belief in the players that they have here too. And that's important as well. So yeah, we're very, very excited, and we can't wait to get going.
Last question for me, obviously, right, Grey Cup or bust, whatever. I mean, that's what everyone says. But I mean, realistically, coming in, right, second season, being thrust into this position, what would you look at the end of the year, said this was a successful run, right? I feel like I had a successful season. What goals would you have to be able to say that?
Well, I think that team-wise, absolutely, if we're going for anything less than a Grey Cup, I think we're in it for the wrong reasons. But personally, I would love to see, I just want to be able to look at myself on the first preseason game and to our last game, which is hopefully in Saskatchewan in the Grey Cup. I would love to see a better player at the end of it. I would love to see me a better leader, better quarterback. I just like to see some kind of improvement. And going into the off season, that's my biggest goal every single day, every single outing, is just to be a little bit better. And I owe that to the organization, to my teammates, and to the fans, that I hold myself to that. But this team, we're bringing in the guys that we think that we're going to win with, right? And that's why the character portion is so important, is because we need people who are bought in, and Coach Rick and Neil are doing that. And that, again, that's why we're so excited. Guys aren't coming here to have another non-playoff season, right? We're in here to go all the way, and why not? Why not us, right?
Well, we have our Airbnb purchased already, rented already in Saskatchewan. So, we would like to see you there. We'd like to have, some orange, representation there in the Grey Cup. But this is great. I'm really excited we could get you on. Like I said, this was me even before all this stuff. I like getting on. So, but obviously now you as a starter, tremendous excitement, CFL free agency and everything else. I feel good for the season.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Reed. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks. Well, we have good friend, longtime friend of the show, Rob Vanstone, coming back on today. How are you doing, sir?
Not too bad, Reed. How are you doing?
We're good. This is really the first CFL free agency, right, that we're living through. I mean, obviously last year and kind of there was overshadowed by a lot of other things going on, right, with XFL and all that. Is this normally, it's been very compelling for me to watch and follow and read along with all this stuff. Is it always this compelling?
It used to be better, actually. before they introduced the sort of the negotiating window prior to free agency day, the free agency day would just be this flurry for the first hour or two. But now you've got about a week beforehand where a lot of the deals are made and a lot of them are announced by the players. So once, in this case, February 8th gets here, a lot of the big stuff has happened already. There were still some notable moves, of course, but you used to have all of them that first day. Now, a lot of those things were negotiated kind of quietly leading up to the deadline. Teams knew who they had, I'm sure, coming in many cases. But to me, this year's free agency day was more of an anticlimax. And I think they've gone with that window for the last 2 years now. Before, it had all sorts of logistical problems because you're just trying to negotiate on as soon as the clock strikes 11 or whatever. And so it was a little less chaotic this year. But I think it was a little more fun when everybody hit the open market at once. And it was just craziness for 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days, because it would take a while to wade through all the premier free agents. In the case of Saskatchewan, for example, they signed AC Leonard, who led the CFL in sacks last year. He was due to become a free agent. They signed him to a two-year contract before the free agency window. And then late in the free agency window, the Riders announced that Duke Williams was coming back here. And so those were their two big ones, and they were signed before February 8th, which is my dog Snowball's 50th birthday. He's not a marvel. Snowball passed away in 1984. He would have been 50 on February 8th.
That's incredible. So in terms of, wading through, and obviously, like you said, the big moves kind of before and the Duke of Williams and all of that, Andrew Harris to the Argos, right? Trevor Harris finding his way back to the Alouettes. I mean, what were some of the ones that really, if you had to pick 3 or 4 of namesakes that you'll remember come the end of the season, like, oh, remember that offseason, remember that free agency pickup? Where would you put, who are you thinking?
Well, I think Jeremiah Mazzoli to Ottawa is really interesting. Everybody to Ottawa, the way the players seem to be migrating there. Ottawa was the most reminiscent of the old style free agency, where just so much happened and there were so many things, so many players going to one team at once. I think that's massive, just getting their quarterbacking situation solidified. I think I am really interested, as you alluded to, Andrew Harris in Toronto, especially when they play Winnipeg. That will be beautiful to see. Kenny Lawler to the Edmonton Eskimos for $300,000. Pardon me, Edmonton Elks. I will never get this right. Kenny Lawler to the Edmonton Elks for $300,000, which is an unprecedented price tag for a receiver. And I think the price tags for receivers overall were really elevated in the past few months. If you're looking at Duke Williams getting a reported $260,000 and Lucky Whitehead getting over 200, etc. I think Greg Ellingson to Winnipeg is really going to be an underrated yet significant signing. There's so much is made over about Kenny Lawler leaving Winnipeg, but them getting Greg Ellingson, I think it's pretty. That's pretty massive as well. I'm sure I'm missing a few. Calgary really didn't do anything. John Huffnagel was joking that by the time they re-signed all the people they wanted to re-sign, didn't have enough left to go to McDonald's. But that aside, a lot of the teams were, or most of the teams were very active leading up to free agency, and then basically for the first hour and a half afterwards. There's still some players yet to sign, but most of them are second or third tier players. There's only so much money to spend, so you got to get that money when you can, and that means early.
Yeah, it's weird. Like the Kenny Lawler thing, here Lucky Whitehead was it 3 weeks ago, signs this, highest receiver, whatever. And now here, it's 100. I mean, it's more than, 50% more, right? They go from 2 to 3. I mean, and then and not that Nick Arbuckle isn't like it seems weird to me that you would spend $300,000 on the receiver for Nick Arbuckle. I'm stuck on that. Is that weird?
Yeah, I think if you're going to go get if you're going to get Kenny Lawler, wouldn't you want to have a quarterback situation that is more stable? And, I'm kind of surprised that Edmonton wasn't perhaps they were in the market for Jeremiah Mazzoli. They didn't ultimately get him, but they were interested in Mazzoli. I'm a little surprised that Trevor Harris didn't end up back in Edmonton. He ends up signing in Montreal, and they already have Vernon Adams Jr. in Montreal. So I thought Trevor Harris might be a really nice fit going back to Edmonton, given the seeming paucity of options and almost did it again. The Elks' seeming determination to find someone other than Nick Arbuckle to play quarterback, and given that they swung and missed there, how do you now sell Nick Arbuckle on? Hey, Nick, you're our guy. There's going to be some interesting massaging going on in the Alberta cap.
It's kind of like in the NFL when Miami was courting Deshaun Watson all year, and then that didn't work out. And it's like, oh no, Tua, you're really our guy.
We love you.
We love you. The whole thing with the quarterbacks and Trevor Harris, I think Trevor Harris is the biggest loser of this whole thing, because here he was going to get his big bonus in December, gets cut. I confirmed with Farhan today. I'm like, he owed a lot of money, got cut, then get signed back for less money in the same team that cut him when he didn't get the bonus.
And he might just be an absolutely great bargain. To get a quarterback of that caliber, I think for a reported $120,000. Cody Fajardo got more than that in a signing bonus when he redid his contract a few weeks ago. So, and you never really know with Vernon Adams Jr. in Montreal. You can have great games and you can have poor games. And I know, judging by his Twitter account, he's not exactly enamored with the fact that the Alouettes have brought in Trevor Harris, or brought back Trevor Harris. So maybe that shakes free. It's interesting, because suppose that Vernon Adams Jr. doesn't become the guy in Montreal, or remain the guy in Montreal, and Trevor Harris emerges there. It was Chris Jones who had brought Vernon Adams Jr. to Saskatchewan in 2017. So they have a history. So maybe Vernon Adams Jr. ends up in Edmonton if Trevor Harris ends up being the number one quarterback in Montreal.
Yeah, I did see that. I saw, and Vernon was on our show a couple weeks ago. I thought Vernon was a really nice guy, and he is a nice guy. But there was a little salt there. There was a little salt, like, well, I guess I got to be the man again. Or, and I'm not trying to disparage whoever. It would certainly upset me as well if I was signed in and then you bring back the guy that, it's complicated, right? But what do you make of that?
Yeah, that one really surprised me. When I looked at places that Trevor Harris was going to go, I just didn't think that Montreal was going to be that great an option for him. And I didn't think he was going to be that enticing an option for the Alouettes, because I think Vernon Adams Jr. should be clearly the guy there. But obviously there's some unease. Vernon Adams Jr., by the way, was Eastern Washington's quarterback, Cooper Kupp's first 2 years there. And if you look at Cooper Kupp's 4-year-by-year totals at Eastern Washington, he caught the most touchdown passes in his 4-year college career as a freshman, 21, with Vernon Adams Jr. as a quarterback. So how many guys have better numbers as a freshman than they do as a senior? That tells you something about how good Vernon Adams Jr. was. So there's my Super Bowl aside for the day. Yeah. But yeah, I think Vernon Adams Jr., that's a really, that one just doesn't add up for me. But if he doesn't work out in Montreal, I'm sure there's a lot of teams would be very happy to have him.
It's just weird. It seems almost like, because a lot of like Jeremiah Masoli is a very different quarterback, right, than Trevor Harris. They're very different. But it just seems like sometimes with the CFL, it's like we just got to get someone here at this point. Like we just got to find someone. Like even Vernon and Trevor are not the same quarterback at all. It's really weird.
It is weird. Just totally different system. I just don't get the Masoli thing. I really don't. Yeah, he came into the Grey Cup and played well, but and he has done in certain spurts when he was with Hamilton. But I don't know. There's a lot of starting quarterbacks in this league that I would be more excited about having on my team than Jeremiah Masoli, and Trevor Harris is one of them, and Vernon Adams Jr. is another.
It's interesting. More head-scratching high spend, Jeremiah Masoli or McLeod in Toronto?
That one, I don't get that at all. I watched the playoff game and the Argos playoff game, and I thought, well, I think the Argos are going to be shopping for a quarterback. And
they did. They had them.
I don't get that. I really don't. That one really puzzled me. They must be seeing something that I don't, and they're in a much better position to critique it than me sitting here on on a bed in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, talking into a phone. So, but just on the surface, I don't get the McLeod Bethel Thompson thing. Yes, he led the league in touchdown passes in 2019 with 26, but a lot of, Bo Levi Mitchell was hurt for part of that year, etc. I think there were some circumstances there that allowed McLeod Bethel Thompson to just kind of sneak up the middle and do that. And some of those touchdown passes were in garbage time. That wasn't a very good Argo team. And then last year, give him his due. I mean, he did help the Argos have a pretty good year, but in the playoffs, there were opportunities there in which they couldn't cash in. And I just that playoff loss didn't leave me with a really strong feeling that the Argonauts have a solid base of quarterbacking there. So, why isn't Trevor Harris in Toronto? I mean, Trevor Harris, I think maybe one of those guys who'll play for a lot of teams by the time he's done. But I like him a lot more than a lot of teams starting quarterbacks.
It's so like McLeod is fascinating because we had Christina, Costabile on last week, right? CFL, CA writer, and she loves McLeod and people love McLeod. And it's just interesting how you could go person to person and it's like totally polar opposites. Oh, well, he had this stretch of this many plays and he's had this many plays, without intercept. It's really interesting.
You look around the league and there's a bit of a changing of the guard or changing of the quarterback, I guess. BC, you're talking about Nathan Rourke and Michael O'Connell. Nathan's a great get for you, by the way, for this podcast. Calgary, even though Bo Levi Mitchell's been entrenched there, you start to wonder with the year that he is coming off of with an abnormally high interception total and Nick Mayer there. Maybe there's something afoot. Edmonton, they're obviously not sold on Nick Arbuckle. Cody Fajardo, there are some people here, at least in the fan base, that aren't sold on him because he didn't have as good a year as he did in 2019. Winnipeg, they're fine. Zach Claros, most outstanding player. Although he's been off concussed and there's nothing behind him. And then you go to the East, and I'm just not sure that anybody from the East really just leaves my head spinning thinking of them as a quarterback. There's a lot of 6 out of 10s, and that's about where it stops.
This is interesting. I like this. I'm glad these are good takes. I'm glad different than what I've been living through the last couple of days. But that's okay. I think I like having dissenting opinions on this. BC, you mentioned that, Nathan Rourke and Michael O'Connell, right? Combined 67 pass completions, I believe, right? That I think Dave Naylor quoted. Great move or the greatest move in terms of the quarterback room this year?
I love that.
Good.
It clears all sorts of salary cap room for them. So it's a bit of an interesting dynamic. And the quarterback will be one of the lowest paid players on the offense in BC, which you don't see very often. So, and that I think fueled a bit of the receiver expenditures too, because suddenly knowing that they're not going to be paying top dollar for a quarterback, they've got $200,000 to pay Lucky Whitehead. And that raises the bar for all receivers. And there are better receivers than Lucky Whitehead. So then Duke Williams cashes in, and then Kenny Lawler as well. But I just think it's intriguing to see what might be happening in BC. It's been since Russ Jackson in 1969 that there's been a long-term Canadian quarterback. In 1980, Jerry DiTilio with Montreal was named the most outstanding player in the East, what was then the Eastern Conference. He was a Canadian quarterback, and then they were so crazy about him and that they brought in Vince Ferragamo from the Los Angeles Rams. So in 81. So there's been little spurts of Canadians playing quarterback, but I don't think for a long time that a team has demonstrated this amount of degree of commitment to one Canadian quarterback, let alone two. And that's really going to be intriguing. It really opens the door for some interesting discussions if the BC Lions can make it work with Nathan Rourke.
Well, it's like the Tom Brady thing, right? Take less, spread it out, right? Don't, and not obviously, CFL salary, way different, all that. But, don't take this Michael Riley $750,000, right? It leaves, and then you're able to pay it. I mean, certainly not to the extent of, because I think Nathan's on like 80,000 or, it's substantially low. I mean, when people are poo-pooing Trevor Harris's contract, Nathan Rourke, right? But I think the idea with him, and the same with like Jake Mayer, is, well, you got that big contract coming, let's ride this year out, right?
You see a bit of that in the NFL too, where you want to get some quarterbacks and pay them while they're still on their rookie contract. Mm-hmm. And then, by the time they start earning $40 million, that encumbers you elsewhere. It's not to say that you can't win a Super Bowl with a $40 million quarterback, but boy, does that liberate you financially if you've got a quarterback on a rookie contract for that period of time. And so maybe we're seeing not necessarily an equivalent of that, but a variation of that in the Canadian Football League.
It's okay if you don't. Do you have any thoughts on Chad Kelly, nephew of Jim Kelly, signing with the Argonauts?
I don't know a ton about. I believe he was with Denver at one point. If my fading memory isn't eluding me here, but I mean, great opportunity for him or anybody in Toronto, given what was referenced earlier with McLeod Bethel Thompson. It just, especially if you look at that market too, like they really need somebody who's going to get tongues wagging. And Toronto.
McLeod gets hearts beating with this dreamy eyes. They don't need that. McLeod is the face of that franchise.
But what, Toronto's like a virtue. That's a Buffalo Bills town. And I remember when I was at the Grey Cup in 89 in Toronto, and I had a cab driver ask me, what are you in town for? And I said, Grey Cup. And he goes, oh, that's here this weekend? And the big thing in his mind was that the Buffalo Bills were playing the Cincinnati Bengals that weekend. There's a huge Buffalo Bills following in Toronto, of course. So maybe getting Jim Kelly's nephew in Toronto might raise the antennae of a few people and maybe entice them to go to Argos game should he play.
Well, what's interesting too about that, and aside from this interview, we're going to talk about it tonight. He had been rumored for the USFL upstart that is happening in April, and it's very interesting that a quarterback would choose to go to Toronto as a backup versus, stay and play in Birmingham for 12 weeks for probably roughly about the same money. You know what I mean? Like they'll probably make a little less in the USFL, but you're also in the States. So it's just curious that way.
I'm a little surprised that maybe some players aren't holding off. Maybe that's a declaration of somewhat the lack of confidence in the USFL. I'm not totally familiar with what the salary structure is there. Maybe there's more money to be had in Canada than in the USFL. I don't think there's any Donald Trumps in the USFL willing to pay what Donald Trump paid for Herschel Walker or Doug Flutie. I don't think there's any Steve Young contracts coming out of there. So maybe players are just thinking, let's just get the money while we can and the opportunity while we can get it. And the CFL has proved to be a pretty good pipeline to the National Football League too. So it's not like you're disqualifying yourself from going to the NFL. One of the impediments once upon a time was when you signed with the CFL. Well, it's still there. I mean, if you a first year contract is at least a year and an option. So you're locking yourself in for more than 1 year. If you're a veteran player, you can sign a 1 year contract and then go. So there's more mobility. There's a decent amount of mobility. There's players can take a look at the NFL options. You saw that with Devontae Dedmon in Ottawa. So I think there's still that pipeline to the National Football League. The NFL people, they're looking for talent, and wherever they can find it, they're going to mine it. And it's so competitive down there. So you're not out of sight, out of mind if you're playing in the Canadian Football League. And it also tests your ability as an athlete because you've got a bigger field to maneuver around too.
What do you make of the divorce between, and I know we talked a little bit about the Andrew Harris, but him being this feeling of like disrespect, right? They lost faith in me. Maybe they thought a 35-year-old running back wasn't worth the contract, which is understandable as well. And him going to Toronto, I mean, is that even a good fit? And what do you think of just ending that the way it did?
It just doesn't always happen the way you want it to happen. In a perfect world, Peyton Manning would have ended his career in Indianapolis. Joe Namath would have been a Jet. Johnny Unitas would have finished off in Baltimore. Joe Montana would have finished off in San Francisco, etc. G. Roy Simon would have finished with the BC Lions. It's Willie Pless with them. There's so many ways of looking at that. So this is just symptomatic of what happens in a salary cap league when a player starts to creep into his 30s, or in the case of Andrew Harris, his mid-30s. I don't think it's a matter of disrespect. You look at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers depth chart, and they've got two Canadian running backs who are younger and who they think can at least come close to the production that Andrew Harris gave them. And you have to factor in is there going to be a decline? It sure didn't look like it in the playoffs when he was in Saskatchewan. When he was against Saskatchewan in the West Final, he was running like crazy. But that's a really perilous age for not just a running back, but any professional football player, perhaps with the exception of quarterbacks. So I don't think it's a matter of being disrespected. I just think if you're the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, suddenly you've got to pay everybody like they're a champion. And that is really a problem. When teams have won 2 Grey Cups in a row, everybody and these players have all contributed to it. They've kept that core together. Everybody expects to be paid that kind of wage, and their marketability goes up because they've got that 2-time champion label, and that makes it exceedingly tough. And a lot of Bombers players too took probably less than market value to stay there last year. A few have done that this year, but they're still feeling the squeeze. And in the case of Adam Bighill, for example, I think he's making up some of that money that he relinquished last year. So that's got to come from somewhere. And if you're looking at where to cut, it's the older player. It's no different than I think in Saskatchewan. If you look at some of the players who were allowed to leave here or decided to leave, by and large, they're in their 30s or late 20s. It's Jeremy O'Day wanted to keep his younger players, and if he's going to err, he's going to err maybe giving up on a veteran player a year early as opposed to a year too late. A year ago around here, a lot of the talk was, how could the Riders not keep Charleston Hughes? He was 37. By the time last season was over, he looked like he was 57. So it validated the Riders' decision. And, in the case of Andrew Harris, if he can come back and play like he did when he was a youngster of 32, it's a great move for the Argos. But I don't think it's necessarily an ill-advised move for Winnipeg, because they just got to just look at the likelihood that a 35-year-old player is going to be somewhat in decline. And they've also got that depth behind him, and they've got a salary cap squeeze by virtue of having been so successful the last 2 years. That means you got really good players, and you got to pay them as such.
Yeah, it's just hard. It's some of the time like that. It's like, I mean, I know you're having quotes for the media and stuff, but you got to be like realistic, a little bit. If you're Andrew Harris, you got to be a little bit like understanding of that versus like, well, I feel, it came out of nowhere, and I don't know. It just seems like let's be cognizant of the situation here a little bit.
And two, it's not easy to be your own agent. And Andrew Harris represented himself in discussions. It's so easy to take that personally. If you've got an agent in the talks, the general manager is talking to the agent, and I think it's less likely to create a situation where there's bitterness. But in the case of the Bombers, you've got Kyle Walters saying to Andrew Harris, I don't know what the nature of the conversation was, but at some point he would have made it very clear that they didn't think Andrew Harris was worth what Andrew Harris thought he was worth. And there's no intermediary in the form of an agent. So when you're hearing it right from the GM, I think it's going to sting a little more. You don't have an agent to play middleman.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that changes a lot. That definitely adds more color to that. A couple questions. I don't want to hold you too long on here.
I got all night. I'm just sitting here with a dog.
Well, I appreciate your time. I want to talk about our mutual friend Rod Peterson this week has been incensed, right? Like these 1-year contracts, and it's terrible. And the people, it's exciting to see all this free agency, but then I'm going to turn on the TV right in June, and that guy's on this team now. I didn't even realize that, right? Where do you come down on that about, the excitement of having players be able to get the money that they want, right? Get paid, do all that, but then also continuity and for the fans, involvement with the teams.
Yeah, I'm more closely aligned with Rod on that one. I just think the 1-year contract makes it difficult. It's almost like you're picking a different fantasy football team every year.
It is.
And maybe it's kind of a partial keeper league where you can keep 4 or 5 players, and then everything else goes into the pot. And that doesn't do much for player identifiability, doesn't do much for marketing. It's tough to have that just kind of transiency. It's tough to build a team. Now, you can rebuild a team in no time if you spend your money wisely, but I don't like it. And I'm not sure it does the players any good either. Once upon a time, early in the early years of the Major League Baseball Players Association, and Marvin Miller was in charge, and one of the things he tried to resist was an absolute ton of free agents, because the fewer free agents there are, the more there's a bidding war, and it's supply and demand comes into effect. And once upon a time, the owners, proposed to Marvin Miller, let's just sign everybody to 1-year contracts. Everybody comes a free agent. And Marvin Miller was absolutely viscerally opposed to that, because that's the last thing he wants. There's just the market is flooded. So you look at the receivers this year, and it's exciting to see all these great receivers out there, but it's not like everybody can zero in on Duke Williams. And if you don't get Duke Williams, you've lost the free agent receiver, because, hey, there's also Kenny Lawler. Hey, Lucky Whitehead could have tested free agency. There's that kind of magic figure. So there's Greg Ellingson. If there just been that one terrific receiver out there, then I think that makes that player more desirable and more. That can't help but assist the pocketbook and fatten the pocketbook. So I just go back to the Marvin Miller thing. I mean, that's as smart a labor negotiator as there ever has, and that was someone who was an advocate for the players and a fierce opponent of absolute free for all free agency.
Yeah, it certainly does speak, though, I think, to the quality of the athlete in the Canadian Football League, right? That there are this many good players right now moving around, and that many fans that are excited. Like, you hear, and we've heard, this, for the CFL, but like, these are all like big signings and exciting signings. And I mean, I like that, and being like, oh, I know these guys, like that's going to be a good fit for them, or that's not, or we don't know about this. But it speaks that, I think, and if handled better by the CFL itself, right, free agency could be a lot more exciting to, broadcast or do things like that. Last question, winner of so far, team winner of the free agency and loser of the free agency.
That's an interesting one. I would say loser, just because they really didn't have a choice, would be the Calgary Stampeders, because but that also speaks to how well they did re-signing the players they wanted to bring back. But come free agency time, there was really nothing for them to do, because they'd stocked their team. So I'm not sure if they were a loser as much as they just abstained and let everybody recuse themselves and let everybody go. I think Ottawa, I mean, they really needed to make some changes there, and they've signed a pile of players. I'm still not sure Jeremiah Mazzoli is the answer there, but I'm absolutely convinced that the quarterbacks they had were not the answer. So if you look at what the Ottawa Red Blacks did, I think they really helped themselves. The loser, Edmonton not getting a quarterback. I think that works against a lot of the gains they made. Chris Jones showed in Saskatchewan that without an A1 tier 1 quarterback, you can do reasonably well. They had Kevin Glenn and Brandon Bridge in 2017. They won 10 games. And the next year they had Zach Collaros, who wasn't the Zach Collaros we're seeing in Winnipeg now, and they won 12 games. But when Chris Jones won a Grey Cup, he had Mike O'Reilly in 2015. And I think you need that type of player. And that was the number one item, I think, on as much as they spent for Kenny Lawler, the number one thing the Edmonton Elks, yes, I got it right, had to deal with was get a quarterback, and they didn't. And I think that's ultimately to their detriment.
Oh, that'll be interesting to see whether we have in the CFL News Hub, we have our Nick Arbuckle fans. So we'll see. There's certainly people that there might not be a lot, but there are some people that are Nick Arbuckle fans. So we'll see. Rob, thank you so much for coming on, and we're fitting this all in, and we working around schedules, and I appreciate your insights. And I knew that you'd be the right person to talk to this week to kind of get the macro and the micro of kind of everything that's going on. So,
pleasure, Reed. And if I haven't proven to be the right person, I hope you find that person.
We'll find
what I've said is very easily refuted and encountered. So,
and we have a Candy sighting. That's good.
There's Candy. Oh, isn't she sweet? Oh, here she goes. She's mobbing me.
Dorothy will be happy. This is good. Rob, we'll see you next time.
You bet. Thanks so much, Reed. Take care.
Welcome back. I want to thank all of our guests, Mike, Nathan, and Rob. Thank you again for joining us, especially Rob, who's been on the show, 2 or 3 times now?
Yeah, I think 3 times. 3 times.
I think you might be our first 3-time guest.
He's getting up there. Well, Mike, I think he and Mike. I mean, it makes sense.
It's apparently a competition.
So real quick. So these CFL stories, there's 10 million stories this week, right? Rob and I talked about a bunch. This is just a handful, right? I mean, I just did so I just don't, no one get mad at me. Like I just picked some highlights along the way, but there was 87 stories we could talk about.
Well, if they've been listening to the whole thing, they know you've been talking about this with Rob.
And I just want to make sure that and this is just some interesting tidbits to talk to Paul about here after we get done. So
Awesome. My Argos signing Chad Kelly, of course, who is the nephew of Hall of Famer Jim Kelly, one of the best quarterbacks to never win a title. Jim Kelly, it's like Dan Marino 1, Jim Kelly 2. He went to Ole Miss and he has ties to USFL potentially. Is that what I'm seeing?
Well, don't you think that USFL should have gone out of their way to maybe get the nephew of Jim Kelly?
You would think.
Like Argos are not paying.
I'm surprised FCF isn't tweeting at him right now. Hey, come sign a contract with us. I'm surprised it's not happening.
Player Breeze, FCF.
That's such a solid tweet. Disrespectful. Andrew Harris explained split from Bombers after last-ditch effort out of nowhere. Apparently, he said on his last second contract extension, it definitely was a big insult. It's one that wouldn't have made me the highest paid running back in the league. Someone who's done so much for the team, and yes, I understand they're looking for the future, but the past and what I would bring to the future is still a hell of a lot, or a lot, I should say.
What do you think about Toronto picking up Andrew Harris? This is a big pickup for you guys.
I love it. I think Toronto knows they're close to winning. I think they know they're close to possibly winning and getting over that hump. So why not bolster things? Why not spend a little money, MLSE, and bring a chip to Toronto? Bring a chip to the 6. Make me happy.
35-year-old running back. Let's see it.
I mean, but how old was Sean Alexander when he broke? How old was LaDainian Tomlinson when he broke Sean Alexander's record?
I don't know. This was interesting. Mike Rob Vanstone explained too that Harris was acting as his own agent. I go, this explains a lot more of the bitterness that came from these contract negotiations when you're
like how Richard Sherman acted when he negotiated his deal with the Niners. He was acting a little bit similar to this when he was mad at the Seahawks for not, of course, extending him. Bombers are coveting experience back.
Bomber covet. That's the Canadian for a quarterback.
Nope. Sean McGuire retired, so the Bombers are without a veteran backup. Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting. Sean McGuire, he was always kind of the steady hand behind Zach Collaros. Zach Collaros sat out a couple games this year, because of injury, and Sean struggled a little bit, but he's moving on to be a career in federal law enforcement.
Okay. Other veteran quarterbacks making things happen. Montreal Alouettes re-signing Trevor Harris for the 2022 season. He now on the same team with Vernon Evans and Dominique Davis to see who's going to start there. But of course, the way things go in the CFL, all three of them will start at some point. I guarantee it.
Well, the interesting thing with Trevor is he got picked up from Edmonton last year. He was due a big end of year bonus, and then they cut him in December. And then they re-signed him now.
Business.
And he doesn't get that bonus. Like, I tweeted at Farhan. I'm like, hey, right, he doesn't get that. Farhan's like, no, he doesn't get that. And now he's signed to lower money. It's terrible. I think Trevor Harris got the worst deal of the free agency.
Probably. Vernon Adams, he's motivated by the Alouettes re-signing Trevor Harris. He says, don't try and call me now. He tweeted out, they say, BUVA, I bet. 2019 vibes, back to work. Don't try to call me now, snake. Ooh, he's calling them snakes too. Spicy.
So is that like snakes at Trevor or the team?
The team. Guarantee a team. Because he said, don't try to call me now to the team. Like, I don't think Vernon would ever I'm not saying I'm going to be Vernon as spokesperson, but I don't think a fellow player would call another player a snake. At the end of the day, the players pretty much unite against ownership. And I think he's calling the ownership of the Alouettes snakes.
Wow. Vernon, friend of the show, Vernon Adams.
There you go. Alouettes signing future Hall of Fame defensive tackle Almondo Sewell to a contract extension throughout the 2023 season. He got 5 sacks in 14 games and 19 tackles. His first season in Montreal was 2021. And in 153 career games in the CFL, the 35-year-old has recorded 301 defensive tackles and 65 sacks.
He's a beast. Dude's a beast. This is a good pickup for Alouettes.
Reed's BC Lions signing Michael O'Connor, the second Canadian quarterback with Nathan Rourke, as well as former Rough Riders American quarterback Isaac Harker. So, there you go. 3 quarterbacks on that team.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think Harker will be a practice, a training camp guy. According to Jim Mullen, this is the first 1-2 Canadian duo since the 1940s. Jim's you'd have to go back pre-merger. I mean, this is huge because Nathan, you never get starting Canadian quarterbacks, and you certainly don't get 2.
BC also signing Lucius Purfoy.
Yep.
Lucius Purfoy from Saskatchewan and kicker Sean White.
Yep. Sean's back. He was with them, and he's 36, back with them after signing in 2007.
CFL All-Star receiver Kenny Lawler has made a commitment to sign with Edmonton Elks, according to Dave Naylor. He will earn $300,000 in 2022, and He's
the
back.
highest non-paid quarterback in the league.
Wow, and he's with Nick Arbuckle.
Which is like, that's like buying your kid a Ferrari. I don't want to disparage Nick Arbuckle, but that's like buying, you know what I mean? He has a $300,000. You have the highest paid receiver in the league.
Nick better make some Nick better like target him like 75% of the time if he's making $300,000 a Canadian. With a Canadian.
The highest paid non-quarterback. That's insane.
5-time 1,000-yard receiver Greg Ellingson, who probably should get that kind of money, has signed with Winnipeg Blue Bombers to a 1-year contract for this season. He replaces Kenny Lawler. He's 33 years old. He's got 5 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, and during the shortened 2021 season, he had 47 receptions for 687 yards in 10 games, while earning $135,000.
Yeah. Last story, your boy.
He's not my boy. Just like the BC Lions are the America's CFL team, he's not my boy. Ottawa Red Blacks, of course, signing Jeremiah Masoli to a 2-year contract worth $400,000.
$400,000 per year.
Per year. Yeah. Not bad, Jeremiah. Get your money right now, because Lord knows you won't get in the NFL because you're not good.
That's a big contract for him. Rob, on our CFL group chat, he was saying that like Ottawa needed to make moves or else they were going to get murdered by the fan base. Like this is like to appease.
Well, Ottawa was really bad last year.
Yeah,
really
but we have to go sign them. It's just weird though. Jeremiah, Red Blacks are making big moves. I don't know if I like this Masoli signing, but they're making big moves.
We'll see what happens next season with Masoli. Hopefully he guides them to a couple more wins, or hopefully not, because I don't like Jeremiah Masoli. Who do I don't like more? Who do you think I don't like more, Masoli or Kevin Sumlin?
You don't like Kevin Sumlin forward. You've not done until you've done a 15-minute rant on Jeremiah Masoli. I don't think you're close.
No, and I don't think it's close. I've done a 5-minute rant on Masoli, maybe a 15-minute rant on Kevin Rumlin.
You need to Google the Houston. When you get off this, you need to Google the Houston Gamblers. You need to see Kevin Sumlin drawing the Houston Gamblers.
Why? So I can watch a drunk man drawing a logo. Great. Thanks again for listening and watching. Again, like and subscribe. Share this podcast with your friends.
No voicemails this week.
No voicemails?
The Markcast.com/voicemail.
Leave a voicemail. We'll play it here on the show. Also, when we get to that subscriber limit, we're going to do some mad giveaways. So again, 2,000 subscribers is a mark. If you want to get in on the giveaway, tell your friends to like and subscribe to the podcast so we can get to that giveaway even sooner than we would, doing this the organic way. Just help us out a little bit. Sure. Just help us out. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you here next week.